afternoon, and welcome back to the 2021 Virtual Frankfort Forum of the Paducah Area Chamber of Commerce. We're so happy to have you back joining us today. We're shifting gears this afternoon a little bit and now going to the administration. And I'm going to first thank our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is Bacon Farmer Workman Engineering and Testing and Markham Engineering. And our additional sponsors are CSI, Denton Law Firm, HDR Engineering, Jim Smith Contracting, Swift & Staley, and U.S. Bank. Now I want to introduce Mary Hammond, the Executive Director of the Paducah Convention and Visitors Bureau. More than 30 years ago, Mary started selling Paducah, and she's never stopped. In 2011, she traveled to Seoul, South Korea to present our community's first application to be a member of the UNESCO Creative Cities Network. 2 years later, Paducah was awarded this highly coveted designation. In 2017, she led the team that hosted the first UNESCO Creative Cities meeting in the United States when the Creative Cities of Crafts and Folk Art met in Paducah. Over the past decade, she has been a leader in the world of tourism. Mary was appointed by former Secretary of State John Kerry to serve on the U.S. National Commission for UNESCO, and she currently serves on the U.S. Travel Board of Directors for the national organization. So she's quite an asset to our community. Welcome, Mary, who's then going to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Sandra. Our next speaker is Secretary Mike Berry. He was appointed by Governor Beshear to serve as Secretary of Kentucky Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet in December 2019. Prior to his appointment, Secretary Berry served as the longest-serving president and CEO in the history of the Kentucky Derby Festival. Under his 22 years of leadership, the Kentucky Derby Festival orchestrated the award-winning two-week celebration for over 1.5 million attendees annually, generating an economic impact of $128 million for Kentucky. Secretary Berry holds a BA in American Studies and Political Science from Georgetown College. Thank you for joining us, Secretary Berry. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks for inviting me. And it amazes me because as I sit here, I'm actually doing this from my kitchen. And I'm looking out and I see this winter wonderland of ice, as well as a battle royal that's going on. Before all this hit, I put bird seed in the bird feeder, and the squirrels and the birds are fighting over it right now. So hopefully there won't be any fallout from that during the presentation. But thank you all so much for inviting me to be here today. I hope everyone is safe and warm and is able to ride out this winter storm, just like we're riding out the pandemic. I know things have been quite different, and it can't possibly be a year since I greeted this group in the Capitol Annex when you actually came to Frankfort. But haven't we gotten good about doing the things that we're doing remotely? Today, this would have been canceled if it wouldn't have been that we've gotten so good about telecommuting and about setting up presentations and offices in our very homes. So again, thank you for this opportunity. I also want to welcome a couple of folks who I believe are on the call from my shop in Frankfort. Danielle Jones, who's the Executive Director of Communications for us. Danielle, I believe, is on. And thank her for her help. And of course, Mike Manjit, who is the Commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Tourism. And we're excited to have him as well. As you all know, he is the face and the voice of tourism for state government. And he is able to get out a little bit and really hone in on tourism, where the cabinet has 13 agencies, and we try to keep them all pointed in the right direction. And as you'll hear from this, because I'm going to share with you our annual report, we've had a good year. So without further blathering from me, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of what the cabinet is basically charged with for the Commonwealth. The Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet, which ironically, my first job in state government was in the Martha Lane Collins administration. Back from 1983 to 1987, I worked in the governor's office. And I remember that it was a big deal because Governor Collins created a tourism cabinet. And Wendell Combs was the first secretary of that cabinet. And since then, we've had many esteemed and very dedicated cabinet secretaries, but it was just the tourism cabinet back then. And then arts was added to it, heritage was added to it. And as a result, we have come to be the entity for state government that promotes not only the rich heritage, but also Kentucky's long history of being a premier travel destination. So the cabinet serves as the top tourism agency. We collaborate with local tourism organizations and partners, the DMOs around the state. We divide the state into regions, and those regions meet, and we try to have folks who work with them in order to facilitate tourism and a unified mission. Our cabinet mission is to support the promotion and the development of Kentucky tourism, arts, and heritage as a mechanism to foster economic growth, education, and employment. And that employment factor is so important because a lot of people think, well, we're just about people coming in and staying, but there has to be people that man those hotels, that man those restaurants, that work in those attractions, et cetera. And so certainly tourism is a very important economic driver. Also, we talk about education and how important education is to the Commonwealth and tourism's role in that, and employment for communities throughout the Commonwealth, while appealing as a diverse destination. So we feel like, and as we talk a little bit more in this presentation, we feel like that Kentucky is very well placed going forward. So the cabinet consists of 13 diverse agencies. Those agencies include things like the state parks, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Kentucky State Fair Board, which is known as Kentucky Venues, because it includes both the state fairgrounds and the Convention Center in Louisville, the Kentucky Horse Park, and other entities such as the Historical Society, the Heritage Council, which does the, I'm sorry, I just pulled a blank, which does the downtown development and historic preservation, as well as things like the Humanities Council. So we're really a very retail and widespread cabinet. The cabinet is responsible for state-owned tourism attractions. And as you see on the screen in front of you, we are directly responsible for the administration of 45 state parks. 17 of those state parks have lodges. 14 of those state parks are historic sites, 13 golf courses, 34 pools and beaches, 15 marinas, 32 campgrounds, and those campgrounds have been very popular this last summer, 12 equestrian competition rings. We actually own and administer 80 horses, including 2 former Kentucky Derby winners, over 1.5 million square feet of event space, and 58 wildlife management areas that total over 161,000 acres within the Commonwealth. So this gives you a little bit about the economic impact and some of the direct impact of the tourism cabinet. You'll notice that visitor spending, and these are according to 2019 numbers that were released in 2020. Tourism is about an $8 billion visitor spending entity in Kentucky, with $11.8 billion in total economic impact. That means about $1.5 billion in tax revenue. And in Kentucky, that means procuring to state and local government about $823 million annually. In arts and culture, $2.3 billion is considered the total economic impact, with $1 million in partnership grants resulting in $84 million in revenue. And then, of course, there's outdoor recreation. And as I've met with many of your groups throughout the Commonwealth during the challenging times of COVID, we realize how fortunate we are in Kentucky that outdoor recreation is one of our strong suits. We have a total of over $5 billion in total economic impact, with numerous jobs, over 70,000. And we even found that there is about, and I'm having a little trouble reading my numbers here on the screen, but we found out that that there is about $5.9 billion in economic impact, and it supports 70,000 jobs. And that can even be broken down to a little over $100 per acre per year of economic impact in public hunting lands. So again, tourism, arts, and outdoor recreation are very widespread. What I'd like to do right now is share with you something that's just been released, and that is the Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet annual report, and we did a video to accompany that. And I may have to adjust this a little bit in order to play it for you. So give me just a minute.
When COVID-19 began to spread throughout the nation, Kentucky immediately implemented emergency response efforts that would protect our most vulnerable and put the health and safety of Kentuckians first. The retail nature of the Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet required us to take action that would not only protect our employees, but the thousands of guests that visit our facilities and attractions each year. While the spread of the virus created its challenges, the array of services provided by our cabinet created an opportunity to provide necessary resources that positioned Kentucky at an advantage for fighting this battle. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, our cabinet agencies were truly resilient and remained committed to expanding our connections with the Commonwealth through virtual opportunities. Through continued innovation and strategic partnerships, 2020 has showed us that COVID-19 is a challenge that Kentucky tourism can not only survive, but also even thrive as a result. Our 2020 annual report highlights these successes. As we embark on a new year and continue our efforts to defeat the virus, our cabinet asks for your continued support as we remain committed to building a better Kentucky through travel development and spending, our many unique artistic offerings, and the diverse heritage of our people and culture.
So I would encourage all of you, if you get a chance, to also go to our website, the Cabinet's website, and you can find out more and actually view that annual report. But just to give you a little background on the COVID response that we had, we provided temporary housing for low acuity patients at Kentucky state parks, as well as first responders. Probably the most success story of that was Lake Barkley State Park in the land between the lakes. We took the Kentucky Expo Center and at one point made it a 2,000 bed makeshift field hospital. And you can see the photo of that behind the insert. Also, that was the one area in the, or the one voting site in the primary for all of Jefferson County. And in the general election was one of the major voting sites that saw the largest number of ballots cast. And then right now, that facility, in addition to hosting some smaller and socially distanced events, is serving as a vaccination distribution site, as is the Kentucky Horse Park in Lexington. Modernization of Kentucky tourism. As we focus on building a better Kentucky, it's important that we stay on top of our game. We continue our efforts to modernize by investing in state-owned tourism venues, not only those state parks we talked about, by improving the overall guest experience. We're putting a lot of money in not only the not only things like new roofs and furniture and flooring, but also things that would improve the guest experience like internet connectivity. Also, you may have noticed if you've been traveling, there are a couple of new welcome centers. We've refurbished the ones in Shelby County and Bullitt County, and we built completely new, state-of-the-art and very eco-friendly welcome centers in Whitley County and Simpson counties. Our in-state travel, despite COVID, traveler sentiment remained strong in 2020. Research tells us that road trips are still the most likely method of travel, and Kentucky is perfectly situated to take advantage of that because we're only 300 miles from several major cities, including Chicago and Nashville. We're within a day's drive of 2/3 of the US population. And we have over 600 miles of border with states that we draw tourism from. Combined with that success, as we mentioned earlier, the geographical location and the outdoor facilities that we have and the attractions make Kentucky a very important destination. And we think that that's going to continue. This last summer, we launched Stay Close, Go Far, and that was our marketing initiative aimed at reminding Kentuckians that they don't have to travel far to experience all the beauty and the history and all of the adventure that the state has to offer. The campaign did focus on the state's affinity for outside food and dining experiences, as well as arts and cultural experiences unique to the Bluegrass. And again, we're looking at doing something very similar to that this year in the spring campaign, which will be Stay Close, Go Far, Travel Safe. And Commissioner Manchett will be unveiling that in the very near future, that I'm sure many of your folks will be a part of. In COVID and outdoor recreation, just to share some numbers with you. So Kentucky reopened state parks and the Kentucky Horse Park. And within the first 2 weeks, we had 7,500 camping reservations and over $600,000 in revenue. In the Kentucky state parks, the room occupancy in 2020 was 43%. That was compared to 53% in the year before. And we thought that that was pretty good given the fact that we were in a pandemic. So people did use the state parks and the campgrounds. The golf courses saw a 22% increase in the summer months when compared to last year. And then, of course, we talk about hunting and fishing. There were a little over 286,000 licenses sold in 2019. Last year, we were just a tick shy of 300,000 hunting and fishing licenses sold through the Department of Kentucky Fish and Wildlife Resources. We unveiled the official visitor's guide, and I hope you've had a chance to get to see that. In the meantime, I'm going to show you a quick video of it so that you get an idea of how we unveiled it and how best to get your copy.
The Kentucky Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet is excited to unveil the cover of our 2021 Official Visitors Guide. In response to the nation's ongoing battle with the COVID-19 virus, this year's cover highlights Kentucky's immense landscape of outdoor recreation with a photo of the magnificent Cumberland Falls. The Official Visitors Guide serves as the state's primary tourism, advertising, and promotional piece, with nearly 350,000 copies distributed worldwide to attract visitors to the Commonwealth. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused us to increase our promotion of Kentucky's outdoor recreation offerings in an effort to sustain the travel industry and to provide safe travel opportunities that allow for social distancing. This year's guide continues the state's effort to highlight safecations by promoting Kentucky as a premier travel destination.
We're excited that this year's Visitor's Guide highlights the beauty of Cumberland Falls, one of our most popular Kentucky state parks. Kentucky is home to 45 state parks, including 17 resort parks that offer visitors an unforgettable outdoor experience. Cumberland Falls offers visitors direct access to safe, family-friendly experiences that allow guests to social distance. We invite visitors to plan their next safecation at the park to see firsthand the beauty and adventure that can be found at Cumberland Falls. We guarantee you will not be disappointed.
We want you to see for yourself all of the amazing places that make Kentucky such a special place to visit. There's no better way to start planning that next safecation than with the Kentucky Official Visitor's Guide. Whether you're a local, first-time visitor, or somewhere in between, our 2021 Official Visitor's Guide has inspiration for safe, socially distant Kentucky adventure. If you're looking for a fun family getaway, an exciting outdoor adventure, a bourbon excursion, or a trip to horse country, you'll find ideas for all that and more in our Visitor's Guide. Order your copy of the 2021 Official Visitor's Guide today at KentuckyTourism.com. Your adventure awaits here in Kentucky. Stay healthy and safe as we begin the new year.
So I didn't want to wrap this presentation up without giving a shout out to several of the great things that are happening in Paducah and in McCracken County. I had the great opportunity to come and visit, as I have several times before, but this year, as I had the opportunity to visit in Western Kentucky, I got to come and visit your downtown area again, and to see all that you all are doing to support tourism and the business growth in the area. Now, prior to COVID, we know that tourism spending in McCracken County totaled about $273 million and supported nearly 2,500 jobs. And while we know that those numbers likely declined in 2020, it's an investment that both state and local officials have made in the community that have created a strong foundation that when tourism recovers, which we believe will begin to happen in 2021, position Paducah as a great place to see the results of that investment. You know, I know that Secretary Gray, I believe, is going to follow me, and I'm sure that he's going to tout the Barkley Regional Airport, but I've really been excited to follow the investment, the $5 million in the state and $19 million in grants from the FAA that have gone into this $42 million project to replace and revamp the existing facility. And I know what a difference that will make to continue to make in building tourism in Western Kentucky. The major economic investment will play a critical role in generating these tourism dollars, not only for your community, but for the state at large. Now, the national recognition for folks in Paducah continues on. And yes, I'm talking about Mary Hammond, who is one of the rock stars of this industry, but also I had the opportunity of reading recently about a newly published poet and former Kentucky Arts Council recipient of an Emerging Artist Award, Britton Shirley, and his new book, Spinning the Vast Fantastic. And it certainly put a positive spotlight on the Paducah artistic community. So when you look at that combined with the Quilt Museum, the West Kentucky WMA, the Lake Barkley State Resort Park, which is just a few miles away, we anticipate that Paducah will be in high demand during our spring advertising campaign, coupled with the commitment of your local CVB and the local attractions and the destination marketing organizations. And I would also be remiss if I didn't tell you and put in a plug for your February speaker for the Paducah Chamber Power and Partnership Breakfast. Brent Leggs is a member of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The greatest thing is he's a Paducah native. He went to Paducah Tillman High School, and he's the executive director of the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund. We're excited to have him involved, not only in Paducah, but we claim him statewide as well. At this time, I know that because of my challenges being an AV person, I've probably run a little bit long, but I'd be happy to take any questions that anyone has. But again, thank you so much for including me in your day. And everyone, please stay safe. And I look forward to seeing you in person when we get a little further down the road past this pandemic.
Secretary Berry, thank you so much for joining us. I was going to ask you to stop sharing your slides, but we do have one question for you. You talked,
Yes, ma'am.
you talked about the new rest welcome centers in some of the other parts of the state, some refurbishing, I think, at a couple, and then 2 new ones. What about Whitehaven? Where do we stand now for with funding for Whitehaven?
I will get information for you on that. I know that we primarily, it is to be quite honest with you, it's a 3-pronged approach when we update these rest areas. First of all, they technically fall under the Department of Transportation or the Transportation Cabinet. So they kind of take the lead on it, but it takes dollars, and that comes from the Finance Cabinet, Finance Administration. And in addition to that, they work with all of us in designing them so that they are eco-friendly, et cetera. Where we come in is that we staff those facilities. So all 3 of these cabinets will be working together, and hopefully Whitehaven will be on the next list of folks that will be able to do an update, and then also to have a little bit better visitor experience when people stop when they're coming to Western Kentucky on a driving trip.
Okay, I see Mary nodding and clapping for that. So that's, Mary, is that what we wanted to hear?
It is indeed. Thank you, Secretary Berry. Nice presentation. The annual report's very nice. I sent a copy to Sandra so we can share if anyone is interested.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we will also have printed copies that we will be mailing to a lot of our partners, legislators, et cetera. So if you find yourself knowing, hey, I'd like somebody to get one of these in the snail mail, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to make sure they get a copy.
Great. You know, we have several priorities that are in our legislative agenda related to tourism. I know Mary has shared those with you.
Yes, ma'am.
And we continue to support tourism in any way that we can. So thank you so much for joining us today. And hearing it, I wrote down some great, I love Safecation. I guess that's a takeoff staycation, so love that. And the place that people need to go is KentuckyTourism.com, and Kentucky is spelled out for more information.
That is correct.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, we're going to shift gears now. I know he mentioned Secretary Gray, which we did have a change of plans. He was unable to join us today as he is the person taking care of the vaccine distribution in Kentucky, working very closely with Governor Beshear. But we are so thrilled to have 2 ladies from the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce joining us. We support the Kentucky Chamber, and they support us. And I have told chambers across the state that may or may not be a member smaller of the Kentucky Chamber. Hopefully they are all a member now. I don't know how a chamber would have stayed in existence without the relationship with the Kentucky Chamber and the U.S. Chamber and the Small Business Administration. But for us in this area with the Kentucky Chamber during COVID-19, without being a member, because they were so brought us so many resources to use and helped provide us information. So I want to introduce the 2 speakers who are joining us now. We have Ashli Watts. Ashli was named the president and CEO of the Kentucky Chamber in November 2019. Imagine that. She took the job in November, and 3 months later, we had a global pandemic hit. She joined the Chamber of Commerce, the Kentucky Chamber, in November 2012, and during her tenure as Senior Vice President of Public Affairs, led efforts in passing significant pieces of legislation. She is a graduate of Campbellsville University with a bachelor's degree in political science and history and a master's degree in public policy and administration from the University of Louisville. Kate Shanks is the Kentucky Chamber Vice President of Public Affairs. She joined the staff of the Kentucky Chamber in November of 2015. And in her current role, she now leads the Chamber's lobbying team and directs the organization's public policy efforts. Prior to that, she worked 12 years for state agencies and held multiple positions relating to communications, policy analysis, and legislative affairs. And she has a bachelor's degree in natural resource conservation and management and a master's in public administration from the University of Kentucky. So Ashli and Kate, if you all, I'm not seeing you yet, but I know that they're going to put you on to talk to us. And I will tell you that we've talked about infrastructure a lot this morning. We had a great session with Senator Thayer, Senator McGarvey, then Representative Rudy, and then Representative Santoro, Upchurch, and Bridges. Am I missing anyone? I have joining me up here at the head table, Brent Hausman, who is our Vice Chair of Business and Public Policy for the Paducah Chamber and helped us come up with our priorities and has been helping us today. So Ashli, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you go first.
Wonderful. You all can hear me okay?
We got you. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, it's so good to see you all. I'm so happy to virtually be with you all. I always love when you come to Frankfort. I think I usually crash your reception at night and get to visit with all of our friends in Paducah, but 'tis 2021, and now with the ice storm here, the logistics probably were easier on your end. That it was all virtual, but I'm very happy to be here. And too bad you guys did not get to hear Secretary Gray. He has been one of my favorite people to work with from the administration. I said this morning, actually, he has the two most important jobs right now in Kentucky. One is leading the vaccination effort. The other is transportation, which we all know is so important, but especially in the middle of an ice storm, it's essentially important. So hopefully you guys will get to hear from him maybe later on down the road. But we just want to say thank you to the Paducah Chamber and especially to Sandra. You all watching and listening know how wonderful Sandra is, but she really is one of the best, if not the best in the state. And she is currently serving as our chair of our Kentucky Chamber of Commerce Executives Network, which is basically all of our local chambers in the state, and there are about 80 of them. Sandra is their chair this year. And so she is a great resource to myself, and Kate would say the same. And we pick her brain often, and we look forward to the days when hopefully we can be together again. I have followed a little bit on social media, the speakers that have gone today. So I saw that you have members of leadership. Sandra just mentioned some. So you guys kind of know what is going on right now here in Frankfort. We are in the middle of a 30-day session, but it's actually a 60-day session crammed into a 30-day session because last year in the middle of the long session, the pandemic happened. They weren't able to really do a 2-year budget. And so in this short 30 days, they not only have to tackle all these big issues that you'll hear about in a minute from Kate, they also have to tackle doing a 1-year budget in the middle of a pandemic. And so logistics, sometimes I think they probably talk about that are hard. Obviously, they're all wearing masks, they're social distancing. They're now able to vote from their office where they never have been before. So really everything looks much different than it did last year. And you all as business leaders in Paducah know what the last 10 months have brought to us. It's not only been a public health crisis, it's also been an economic crisis that has really, really impacted our business community. And so from the Kentucky Chamber's perspective, our main goal, the reason we exist is advocacy, to be your all's voice and your eyes and ears of the Capitol. And so back in the summer, when we realized we were in this for the long haul, we decided to focus our entire 2021 legislative agenda on economic recovery. And everything that we would be working on here in Frankfort was really going to be to make sure that we could all recover from COVID-19 and the aftermath of the economy and what that has meant to business. And I really want to thank you all for all of your support. I think, this is Kate and I were talking earlier, the last 6-7 months, Sandra kind of said we've been in contact pretty frequently with local chambers. And really, as this session has started to emerge, we've really needed your all support on the local level. Everyone here in Frankfort, they probably know myself, they know Kate. We're lobbyists for the chamber. We've been doing this for quite some time. But when they hear from you all back at home, or when they get a text message or they get a phone call from you all saying, session's halfway over and we haven't heard anything about infrastructure, why is that? That really does mean something. And so I'm just really grateful for you all at the Paducah Chamber for really taking a leadership role on policy issues. You guys have done this for many years. You come to Frankfort, you have your legislative agenda. You guys have been talking about things like broadband and infrastructure and lots of things for many, many years. And I think now it's more important than ever. There was an election, obviously, we all know, a couple months ago in November. And here in Kentucky, there were a lot of new legislators that were elected. And so with that comes a lot of education that these legislators need on what issues are important to you all as a business community, and especially in your area in Paducah and McCracken County. And so I think really, especially with so many new legislators that have come on board, having your voice on these issues is really important. And you guys especially have kind of an important ear that you can talk to, and that is Majority Floor Leader Stephen Rudy. He is your representative, but he is now the majority floor leader in the House. And so I know he relies greatly on you all and your advice and your thoughts on key issues. And I would just encourage you guys to keep those doors open, keep talking to your legislators about these issues. The great thing about the chamber is sometimes I always say, legislators may not agree with us on every single thing that we put out there, and that's okay. But they're going to agree with us on a couple of things. But as long as we're unified and we have the voice of the business community behind us, that's really what they want to hear. So Kate's going to talk a little bit about some of our agenda items and where they are. And you've probably heard this throughout the day. But right now, we're all kind of waiting on a vote on historical horse racing. You guys probably have heard about that throughout the day. That has passed the Senate, that is now in the House. And, this is not an easy issue. It is somewhat of a controversial issue. It's very much one of those issues. Sometimes we talk about an urban-rural divide, but we do know that there are horse tracks in the rural parts of Kentucky, and it's important to those small communities as well. So the Kentucky Chamber has been a strong supporter of that, but it's one of those issues that has really kind of sucked up all the air out of the room. And so when you're trying to cram so many issues into a short session, on top of a budget, it leads to some of these issues taking a little longer than we thought they would have. But hopefully after today, we'll see that issue pass. And then really we're going to focus on infrastructure. And I think Kate will kind of tell you a little bit more about how to get involved. But you guys obviously on the river, bordering other states, the importance of infrastructure and what that means to your local community and for economic development. And we have been saying the last couple of months, there really is no better way to recover our economy than to invest in our infrastructure. It is truly an investment in our future. We want to be a place where when we come out of this, that jobs are going to want to come and that jobs are going to want to stay. And we just learned yesterday that Missouri is the last state that surrounds Kentucky that had not raised their gas tax. We were the only one. We were surrounded by states that had raised their gas tax. And yesterday, Missouri basically came out and said they have an agreement. They're going to do it this year. And so we will literally be an island that has been underfunded. And so when we look to economic development, I saw my friend Craig Guest speak earlier today. He has been a great champion for this. He has driven the miles to Frankfort many times at my request to testify on this issue, but really let your legislators know how important this issue is and that we cannot end this session without this discussion. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kate to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of some of the issues that we're dealing with in this short legislative session and kind of give you a little bit of a lay of the land. And then I think at the end, we'll do some Q&A if there's time. So Kate, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Sandra, and everyone at the Paducah Chamber. I just want to reiterate how much we appreciate you all. You're a very active chamber. It means so much to us to have your voices on these issues. So when we started session, we developed our recovery agenda, and there were three main issues that kind of anchored our recovery agenda. There's lots of bills we're working on, dozens of them right now, but I want to focus on the three main issues and then maybe summarize a couple of others that we're focused on. Transportation sort of hangs in the balance these days. We do not have a bill that's been filed. Today was supposed to be the last day to file bills in the House. That has been moved back till Tuesday, but we did really come together late yesterday to give a good push in anticipation of today being the last day to file a bill. I think we will get a bill. I think we will have a bill that we will be able to continue to work on, but we really need to hear voices on this issue. And I'm going to put in the chat, if that's okay. I think everybody will be able to see it. I
don't think they will, but we're going to post that later. If you'll send it to us, we'll post it on our Facebook page.
Perfect. I will send you the instructions on how to contact legislators on this issue and the message that you need to deliver. There's two primary ways to do it. One is through our phone to action application, which sends a message. It's very simple. The challenge is these days, because we're all kind of shut down and locked out of the Capitol, a lot of people are getting a lot of emails. And so we are also encouraging people to call the hotline, because when you call hotline, it gets a little slip sent to them that you left a message in support. So I'll get those instructions to you, Sandra, so that you can share. We are looking for a meaningful transportation revenue increase bill. What does that mean? Well, it means at least a 10-cent gas tax increase. And the reason that is so important, and I think it's important for Paducah, is that will trigger the modernized formula between the cities and the counties on how they share that revenue. The cities and counties share gas tax revenue. Other forms of revenue that go into the road fund, like the tax on your vehicle, goes to the state. And while that's important and it supports the road fund and it builds roads and bridges, the gas tax revenue is really important. And so we support increases to the gas tax of at least 10 cents, and then also some registration and licensing fees that haven't been updated in years. So that's going to be a really important piece, is that we see a meaningful transportation funding or revenue increase bill this session, and not something that'll just like help us hobble along for another year. We think it's important. We think now is the time to do it. This is our 4th year. We know there's a pandemic. It wouldn't hit till later in the year, and there are some other tools that we have to kind of lessen the effect because of the pandemic that we're looking at. So that is an important issue, and it will lead to jobs. We'll get people hired. We'll get people back into work. And it will also set us up for strong infrastructure for economic growth going forward in 2021 and beyond. So we're going to continue to push hard for that. We need some more energy, and we would love to have your support on that. The second issue is liability. COVID-19 liability. Again, thank you to the Paducah Chamber for your help on this. Senate Bill 5 came out of committee. It is ready to come off the floor. We'll be watching today. This is a tough issue. This is a controversial issue. This is complex. You'll hear the word constitutional and unconstitutional throughout all these discussions. But we work with a team of attorneys on this bill. There are a team of attorneys. It's the legislature that are working on the bill. So, we're getting it to a really good place to provide meaningful protections from frivolous lawsuits, and certainly not protections for those who were intentional or grossly negligent, so that we can make sure we get back on our feet and through our economic recovery. I have described the lawsuit situation as that tail that whips around and takes us down long after we've dealt with the actual pandemic and the actual health emergency. It will be the part of the economic crisis that we're in that drags us down further if we don't get this solved soon. And we cannot wait. We cannot wait until next year. More than 30 states have adopted meaningful protection. So we will be a bullseye if we don't do that. So, great thanks to Senator Robert Stivers for his leadership on this in the Senate. Senate President, and we'll be looking forward to getting into the House and moving into the House. So thank you also for your all's help on that. And we do again have a code, a link so that you can send a message to your legislator in supporting Senate Bill 5. And of course, I'll get that to you, Sandra. The other issue, the third issue, is the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. We continue to advocate for funds for our Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. We have about a $1.2 billion hole, about $600 million from a loan from the federal government to pay benefits, and another $600 million to get back to where we were in February with the health of our trust fund. All of that gets repaid on the backs of employers. It does not come from citizens. It comes from employers on the payroll unemployment insurance tax that you pay. It has caused an increase in the tax for the year. We've gone from Schedule A, the least cost, to Schedule E, the highest cost, which is about $100 per employee increase. There's a lot of different ways that we can deal with this. We continue to push for funding for the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. A sizable enough amount of money can pay off our loan early and help us avoid interest and penalties next year. But even if we can't get the full amount that we've asked for about $200 million at least to help us get through and to get some serious funds into the trust fund. There is a chance we could get some relief at the federal level. That would be great. But they're not going to do more than help us with the loan. And the loan is only half of the $1.2 billion hole we have to fill. So there's lots of ways that they can help us with this. There are a couple bills out there. One of them, Senate Bill 7, I'll just put that one on your radar. There's another bill that Representative Weber actually came out of committee today that deals with freezing the tax schedule at Schedule A that would avoid that $100 increase. So there's a couple of different policies that the legislature is taking on to deal with unemployment insurance. Our big win on this will be funding for the trust fund. So as you're talking to legislators, that's something important to say. They are sitting on quite a surplus this year because of all the federal money that was pumped into our state. It generated quite a bit of tax surplus. And I know that there is an interest in putting a lot of that in the rainy day, and there are benefits to the rainy day for sure. But that's a tax. Those are costs that are going to be on employers if we don't get some help for unemployment insurance trust fund. And the governor did put some money in from the CARES Act. This would be in combination with that. If we can kind of piece together different pieces of money to try to help us out that can help us get out of the loan or get out of the hole faster. So those are the three issues that have really anchored our agenda that we think have to get dealt with this session for it to be successful in terms of our economic recovery. We're also working on substance use disorder, House Bill 7, Recovery Ready Communities, a really great bill. You guys should take a look at that. It came out of the House. I think it'll pass the Senate. Senator Whitney Westerfield is carrying it in the Senate. Representative Adam Bowling filed it in the House. So it's a really good bill that would create a council to develop a certification for recovery ready communities and all the different parts of the puzzle to make sure that you're helping people who struggle with substance use disorders. There is a teacher's retirement bill that came out. I believe it's House Bill 285. I might have that number wrong. But that came out of the House last week. And then I think that's an interesting thing to share. You know how controversial that has been. Representative Ed Massey from up in Boone County filed that bill, worked a lot with the teacher groups, got it through the House. It's now over in the Senate. So, you know, we'll await, see what the Senate wants to do with that particular bill, but we did support that. In addition to substance use disorders, some criminal justice reform bills that we are working on, the felony theft threshold is one of them. And then House Bill 25 would remove the felony prohibition on accessing the KEY scholarship, Kentucky Educational Excellence Scholarship. If you have been convicted of a felony, you cannot access that. And we think that's a barrier to education and to avoiding recidivism. So we support that bill. A couple environmental bills came out today out of committee. House Bill 386, Representative Chris Freeland supported that bill, or actually filed that bill, and then House Bill 303 that has to deal with underground utilities. Those are two bills that we support. Chris Freeland's bill deals with water, wastewater discharges, and how that's handled by the cabinet. So those are a couple important bills. And then, of course, education and childcare is on our radar. Senator Danny Carroll has a childcare bill that we are looking at and have reviewed. And then we're looking also at some education. What do we need to be doing to get our kids, dealing with the situation where they've been out of school for so long? And that's an issue that we're certainly tracking as well. So I think that's the bulk of it. Ashli mentioned, I think, historical horse racing. We'll see if that comes off the floor today. That's another big one that's taken a lot of energy in addition to the budget. So we are just continually navigating what is the strangest legislative session I think we've ever experienced, and hoping we can get some of these big ticket bills across the finish line. So with that, I guess we'll take questions. Or Sandra, do you have questions for us?
That was a great summary. Thank you. We talked a lot this morning about the green slips when you talked about calling, because we have participated in some of your campaigns and sent that information on where they send it. But we wanted the green slips are generated by the phone numbers, right? And so we would encourage our local folks to make the call to Frankfort. And then also, our local legislators, they're not quiet necessarily about their cell phones. So if you have their cell phone number, maybe you call them and talk to them. Brent, you want to kind of summarize some of our talk today about infrastructure?
Sure. And you guys have touched on our priorities are similar to yours, obviously. And we had a great, I feel like a great session this morning, talking with our legislators about these priorities. We met with them in person here in December before they went and just kind of reiterated those, had a chance to deal and talk with House and Senate leadership on those priorities. So can you talk about just briefly, obviously the Kentucky Chamber spearheaded Senate Bill 5, the legal liability protection for businesses for COVID-19. Can you talk about how important it was for the Chamber to start early and convene all the parties together and talk about the language of the bill and work through that issue together?
Sure, I can start, and then Kate, this is kind of her baby, so she can get into the nuts and bolts of it. I think last year, there was a bill at the very end of last session, right kind of in the middle of the pandemic, that did address some of the concerns. And what was happening, I know it's hard to remember, sometimes 10 months ago, it seems like a different world, but we saw distilleries being retooled to make hand sanitizer. We saw manufacturers that were being retooled to make masks and gloves. We didn't know that we should be wearing masks in March. That wasn't, a requirement by the CDC. And yet we still had people working in the grocery stores. And so we've just learned so much more over 10 months. But I think here in Kentucky, we've had really, really strong strict guidelines to protect public safety and public health. And if you look at and you think about the last year, there really have not been bad actors in Kentucky's business community. We haven't heard of, mass outbreaks at a manufacturing facility or anything like that. And it's because I think businesses were doing everything in their power to keep their employees and their patrons and all Kentuckians safe, while also trying to keep the economy going and providing those services that we all needed. And so there should be protection in that. There should be protection in if you followed all of Kentucky's very strong guidelines and you tried to do everything you can to keep people safe, you should be protected from frivolous lawsuits. And like Kate said, this is in no way protecting bad actors who are negligent. But we knew very early on this was much bigger than just the Kentucky Chamber. And so we pulled together the hospitals who have been our frontline workers and have really been, at the front line of all of this since March, and our distillers. We pulled together our school board association. So our school boards are all on board with this as well, because this has been kind of a barrier of getting back into school is the threat of a potential, litigious lawsuit. So it's a really broad coalition of business groups, education groups, colleges and universities. Think about what they've had to go through to get people back to living in a dorm in a safe environment, but yet still, giving them the education they need and they paid for. So it's a really complex issue, something that we've never tackled before. And we're dealing with an airborne illness that I always say last year at this time, if I had caught strep throat from my kid's school or on an airplane, of which I used to travel on quite a bit, I would have never thought about holding that employer or that airline liable for me catching strep throat or the flu. But this world is so much different than it was a year ago. And so we're just trying to adapt to kind of the new realities and protect those who have been protecting us and who have done everything in their power to keep up with the guidelines here in Kentucky.
Thank you.
I see Dr. Reese has joined us now. He had to leave for a short period of time, so please meet Dr. Reese, the president of West Kentucky Community and Technical College and the chair of our board this year. Dr. Reese, I don't know how much you got to hear of their presentation, but we've been talking about a lot of the same subjects that are important to all of us. We have the same priorities. Would you like to ask a question now?
Absolutely, but first I must brag on our 5-star chamber under the leadership of Sandra Wilson. 5-star chamber, 5-time top 10 college is a beautiful mix. Certainly my pleasure to serve as chair. So welcome to you, Kate. And Ashli, I think I've been chasing you, trying to get in the same place, right? I think almost a year ago, I wanted you to come speak to the KCTCS presidents, but COVID, of course, changed the world. But anyhow, let me jump in with just 2 quick questions, though. One, certainly we know that, as you mentioned, advocacy and the core for business for the Chamber of Small Businesses. And certainly, though, some of our diverse and small businesses have been disproportionately impacted. So one, I don't know if the Chamber had any specific additional thoughts on that as part one. And then part two, from the educational realm, for me, is still about this Wi-Fi broadband access, particularly to our students in rural areas being able to get education.
Yeah, I think those are 2 great areas to talk about, and we have a great partnership with KCTCS. I talk to one of the presidents or someone at the office almost every single day. I think for small businesses, one thing we didn't mention that we probably should have is that, and Kate could probably fill me in on the number of the bill. There is a bill right now that is really important to small businesses where basically you would not have to pay your taxes on that PPP loan, which was never intended. When the PPP loans, those small business loans that many businesses have been able to utilize across Kentucky, when they were accessed, the intent was never for the state to collect taxes on those. The federal government kind of did their part, and Congress passed a bill that basically said you don't have to pay your federal taxes on those small business loans. The state has not done that yet, and we have been highly encouraging them to do so. A bill did come out of committee a couple days ago. Kate testified on it. So I would encourage you guys to reach out to your legislators to let them know that the PPP loans should not be taxable. But small businesses, you're right, Dr. Reese, have been hit extraordinarily hard. I would say, especially in retail and restaurant. We know even IT services have been hit really hard across Kentucky, kind of looking at the breakdown of the economic sectors. And luckily, there has been some relief from the federal government in terms of stimulus money and PPP loans. But that is going to run out soon. And we keep saying, well, the end is in sight, the light's at the end of the tunnel, but it keeps going on. And so we really do need this session. I think one of the best ways we can help small businesses unilaterally is, one, not pay taxes on your PPP loans. And two, make sure that the legislature know how important that unemployment insurance trust fund is, because we're all going to get hit with a pretty big tax increase if they do not do something about it. And I think especially for small businesses who had to retool everything they've been doing, to get hit with a major tax increase this year would put all of us backwards. So those are two of the kind of the main legislative items. And then, of course, looking at a congressional level, I do think there'll probably be some sort of another relief package. There's been another round of PPP loans that were available in December that I would encourage everyone to look at. Talk to your banks, talk to your lenders about how to do that. But you're right. I mean, the economy has changed. We have now started publishing an economic report in connection with UK, and we released it, I guess, 2 days ago, where every quarter we're going to kind of be tracking the state's economy as we recover, and specifically looking at which sectors have recovered kind of the best and which ones have not. On workforce and broadband, I probably have more meetings at broadband than almost anything else right now. I know more about that speed test that everyone's doing right now than I ever thought I would. But we know that it's not just a luxury anymore, it's essential. My children did school on their laptop today. I am working pretty much full time, obviously on Zoom. And so this is the way the world is. I think even after the pandemic, that's the way the world will continue to be in many ways. And so it's an essential service. We definitely need to put more money toward broadband, especially in those underserved and unserved areas. In the governor's budget, there was $50 million for broadband. We would like to see it be at least that when it comes out of the legislature. It probably needs to be more. We need to make sure that no matter where you live in Kentucky, no matter the income, that you do have access to quality broadband, because it's going to be essential for education and really just kind of the trajectory of someone's life at this point. We've all heard the stories of, people having to sit in the Taco Bell parking lot so they could get Wi-Fi for their kids to go to school, and we just can't have that. And so I do think there's a very concerted bipartisan effort to really work on that issue. And honestly, most of it's going to come down to more money being pumped into Kentucky.
And I'll just add, Dr. Reese, real quick, it's House Bill 278. The PPP loan bill has to do with allowing deductions. So when you spend that PPP loan, forgivable loan money, that's a business expense that should be deducted. And one other thing that's important for small business, and I forgot to mention this because it feels like so long ago, they passed House Bill 1 at the beginning of session in January, and we were able to get language in there to waive interest and penalties on unemployment insurance tax bills, because a lot of businesses pay them in the first quarter. And we know that the second half of 2021 is going to be better for businesses than the first half. That's what economists are telling us. So that allows you to push that payment off without having a penalty and interest. That bill is in the courts, so we're working at getting that language into some other bills, but it did pass in House Bill 1, and that would be something beneficial for small business, for sure.
I knew I should have allowed more time for this session with the Kentucky Chamber. Thank you all so much for joining us. I do want to just mention that broadband test. You mentioned that, Ashli, the speed test. We have information about that on our Facebook page about how to take that, and we want to encourage everyone to take that test. I think it's through the 18th, and that will help them to understand how much and the investment on broadband is needed. The other thing is, I know you have a webinar tomorrow that you're doing on vaccine. We've talked a little bit about vaccine distribution today. I know one of the senators, I believe, talked about seeing that it is being equally distributed throughout Kentucky, but I think every area feels like they're not getting enough. I mean, I know we certainly do in our area and are just crying for more.
Senator McGarvey
said that, yes, he had seen the numbers where it was being equally distributed. But can you just tell us briefly about your webinar tomorrow? Is that something that people could go on your website and register for?
Yes, it's on our social media. We just posted it today, and it is at 11 Eastern. We will have Secretary Jim Gray talking about logistics. We will have the Vice President of Vaccine Research for Pfizer talking. We will have Russ Harper with CVS Health talk about how we're going to be using the pharmacy network to distribute, to your point, Sandra, on how they're going to identify where to put these vaccines based on need. And we also have the Kentucky Hospital Association on there giving some practical advice to employers as they navigate the 1C phase, that critical infrastructure phase, where we have so many businesses. How do you help your employees? What's the best terminology to use as you talk about it? How do you sign up? Where do you go? I mean, we're going to cover all of that tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we will be recording it too and posting it on our website if you can't join us. We have several hundred people registered. I don't think we'll max out, but if for some reason we do, we will record it too.
Okay, KentuckyChamber.com, correct?
kychamber.com. And you can tell the next speaker, our good friend JD Chaney, he's used to us taking up his time, so we apologize.
I have a feeling he's not going to be upset about it.
No.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ashli and Kate. As I've said before, you guys were lifesavers to us. And congratulations, Ashli. It's been now over a year, and look at what all has happened in your year as the president of the Kentucky Chamber. So thank you, guys. We rely on you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all.
Our next speaker is the Executive Director and CEO of the Kentucky League of Cities, KLC. He assumed that position in December of 2019. J.D. Chaney has worked at KLC in a variety of positions over the past 18 years, including the Deputy Executive Director over Membership, Director of Governmental Affairs, and as their Chief Legal Counsel. He began his career with KLC as a law clerk and has spent years advocating for Kentucky's cities with the General Assembly in Frankfort. He has his law degree from the University of Kentucky College of Law, an MBA from Eastern Kentucky University, and a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Montana. J.D., we're so appreciative of you joining us today. You're a great resource for our community.
Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate being included. I didn't know Brent Hausman was going to be at the front dais there either, so I may have reconsidered participating if I knew you were going to involve him. Hey, Brent.
I was going to formally introduce him to you in a few minutes, JD, so thank you for seeing him. Yes, he's right here.
I saw him. I do appreciate being engaged with Paducah, one of the absolute strongest local chambers in the state, and representing one of the strongest communities in the state. I've always been impressed with the work that your all's group has done as well. So the invitation is much appreciated. I want to probably the easiest thing for me to do with regard to infrastructure is just say ditto to probably whatever Ashli covered. This is one of those areas when it comes to infrastructure funding that you're going to see a very close alignment. We pretty much do on most things with the Kentucky Chamber, a very close alignment with the Kentucky Chamber in regard to their position on the increase in the gas user fee or tax, as some people call it. We've got to get that through. It's our prospects are dimming as the session plugs along here to get a bill introduced and get it through when it comes to dealing with that issue this session. For the past 4 sessions, the Kentucky Chamber, the Kentucky League of Cities, the Association of Counties, the Association of Manufacturers, the Kentucky Farm Bureau, I have never in my time in Frankfort seen a coalition as extensive as this one, with no opposition advocating the legislature to enact a policy measure that really does have a significant role in advancing economic development, our recovery, and the health and vitality of our communities. So we've supported this legislation for a long time, and it's starting to look, the prospects are starting to dim quite a bit as this session plugs along on the legislature, missing out on what I would qualify as its single greatest opportunity to really enact a policy measure that would make a difference all across this state by investing in our transportation infrastructure. We've supported a bill that would increase the gas tax. We've got to invest. I know most legislators run from the idea of increasing any kind of revenue like that, but this is a true consumption-based tax. It's one of the few taxes that we have which has people that come and enjoy our infrastructure to contribute to that. It's done on a consumption basis. There may be a transition away from fossil fuels over the next decade or so based on federal policies, but right now we're behind, because if you look at what Indiana's done, Tennessee, every other state besides Missouri, down there closer to you all, every other state surrounding us, whether they're Republicans, whether they're Democrats, they've invested in this infrastructure, and we have massive need in both their cities and counties. I speak for the counties as well on this. In terms of what we use, city governments, I'll talk city government specific. We're on a 40-year replacement cycle for city streets out of that municipal road aid fund. That's how the industry average is 10 to 15. The money we get out of the gas tax puts us on an average 40-year cycle in terms of investment in construction and maintenance of our city streets, our portion of that local gas tax. And the reason it's important to us is that we can't collect anything locally related to specific to our roads unless you take it out of the general fund. And local governments get a share of the state portion, about 40%, comes back and is divided between cities and counties, city and county governments. Counties for their rural and secondary roads and their county roads, and then cities get a portion just to devote to their city streets. One of the things that's essential in the proposal is also a modernization. We're operating under a formula that was enacted in 1948 that gives city governments about 20% of those revenues, and about 80% of it goes to county government. They have a lot more road miles than we do, but it cost us about 50% more for every mile of road that we repair, because we have to mill, grade, move franchisees when we make those repairs. So it's more expensive. We have higher utilization as well. So one of the things in this proposal that has been introduced over the past 3 years and that we're advocating for again this session would fix that formula with new revenues and ensure that city governments get a bigger portion of the split between cities and counties in order to deal with city streets. Most of our cities are having to pull out of their general funds. That's why you see typically higher occupational taxes inside of city governments, because they're not getting a healthy share of the road aid distribution that goes to local governments. And it is absolutely critical. You all know that are in the economic development fields, it is absolutely critical that we make those investments. If you drive around the state, you'll see a lot of cities with a ton of disrepair on their city streets, and that really directly impacts the quality of life. And so that's why it's a number one priority, not only for the Kentucky Chamber, but for the League of Cities this year, the Kentucky Association of Counties. All of us are on the same page with regard to getting it done with little to no opposition out there. And it's a difficult push because the inertia on anything related to a tax, whether or not you have active opposition or not, the legislature is not quick to act on anything related to that. But keep in mind, this is consumption based. It's based on use. It helps get contributions in from people that come into our Commonwealth from out of state that enjoy and use that infrastructure, from them as well to contribute to the well-being of that. And so I assume Ashli made a call to action. We talked last night about this, and we would encourage you all to be active with that, with your legislators or legislators that you know, to help push us through. Today is day 14, I believe, of the session, on a 30-day session, and next Tuesday is the last day to introduce bills. So we're doing our best to get a piece of legislation introduced on it. Sandra also said that one of your major priorities that we also share along with you all as business owners is liability reform. And I can't think of anything that is more critical besides this transportation infrastructure. I guess they may be fairly close to one another, but we've got to have some liability shields. We were hoping and we were hopeful that Senator McConnell would be able to get that through in the HILLS Act. I think everybody has largely resigned themselves to the fact that we're not going to be able to rely on Washington, D.C. For any kind of federal liability limitations. That would have been the most optimal thing for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. In Kentucky, we have something known as the Juror Rights Doctrine, which makes it very difficult for the legislature to enact any kind of bill that would limit an individual's rights to access the courts because of our 1891 constitutional provisions. Not many states have that limitation. And so that's why it was most critical for us that McConnell and Congress had put liability limitations in the federal law. And we've lost that. I think everybody's resigned that will not occur. So you all as businesses have probably realized that you cannot procure on the market adequate insurance coverage for this. And I want to tell you that city governments are in the same boat. It's almost a double whammy. City, counties, and governmental entities are in the same boat. On the worldwide insurance market, we cannot not find coverage to protect related to the pandemic, to protect cities and counties and other governmental units. And what does that mean? If attorneys decide to file a myriad of lawsuits on that, it's a taxpayer ultimately, not insurance, that's going to ultimately be on the hook. And so as we shift away from the federal focus, Senate Bill 5, which the chamber has really worked diligently on, I'll compliment I don't know if Ashley's still listening and Kate, but have worked diligently on that. Cities and counties are also included in that measure. I'm sure it'll be subject to a legal challenge, but it is absolutely necessary that businesses not have that hanging over their heads, nor the taxpayers have that hanging over their heads out of the general fund. Because as you all know, at the end of the day, it's businesses and residents that end up paying the taxes that end up flowing outside of the city government to use to pay these damages and defense costs associated with it. So it's not just a business issue on this liability shield. If we're going to recover, we've got to eliminate those lawsuits or the potential for those lawsuits in a reasonable way. And the third point before I take questions is tax reform. And we covered that a little bit with the gas tax. Our association has long advocated for a modernization of Kentucky's Constitution, again, an antiquated 1891 constitutional provision, which prohibits the legislature from allowing cities and counties to enact any type of consumption-based tax. So, even though we get questions from city officials that say, we'd like to do a sales tax and lower our occupational tax rates to be more competitive in attracting and retaining businesses, you can't do that. The legislature can't enact a statute to do that. That's going to take a constitutional amendment. And unfortunately, in this session, it does not look like that's going to proceed. And then we have a number of cities in Kentucky who are disadvantaged, who have been put into what I would say an artificial caste system of whether or not they can do what they call a restaurant tax. Again, this kind of functions as a consumption-based tax, but we have several cities that used to be under an old classification system where they made them fourth and fifth class cities based on population criteria that was largely ignored, that can impose this fee in lieu of occupational taxes on restaurants, and several cities that don't. Unfortunately, Paducah is one that falls in the category of not being able to consider that even at the local level. And so we've advocated for years with the legislature that we just want to amend that statute to make it clear that all cities be treated equally. It's an equity argument. That doesn't mean that your city leaders would implement that. That doesn't mean that the Owensboro officials would, but we look at our real economic engines around the state: Paducah, Owensboro, Bowling Green, Covington, Ashland, Frankfort. The larger cities cannot access that revenue source. And as a result, it's pushing to an over-reliance on occupational taxes, which really undermines competitiveness from an economic standpoint. So we're trying to push on that bill, on that legislation. And again, I'm missing just the natural inertia that there is with the legislature from considering anything that would look like a tax increase. It's not a money grab. And I want to be clear about that. None of this stuff is just a money grab, so we can go out and spend more money frivolously. It's that we want to set competitive tax policy locally, and that does involve using some consumption-based elements for revenue raising, not just relying on productivity-based taxation and property taxes in order to provide the services that create the quality of life that's conducive for business. We've got to be able to diversify that revenue measure, or else what the legislature's policy, what the state's policies are doing, are forcing both cities and counties into a situation where they're going to continue to have to look at the occupational taxes to generate the sufficient revenue to continue to provide police protection, fire protection, and all of those things that you're relying on as part of your quality of life and your quality community. That makes it attractive to bring businesses and retain them operational. Businesses are shouldering, and workers are shouldering a lot of the burden to keep that going. So it's about diversifying and setting more competitive tax policies, and we've got to break out of this system eventually. And I assume I'll keep singing that song as we go along through this session and the next couple of sessions. Those are the main points that I think that we share deeply in common with the Chamber of Commerce groups. We've looked at bills on child care and the availability of child care and other things of that nature. You might imagine that the league is involved a lot with the discussions about policing reform in Kentucky. That's a pretty intensive debate right now after the riots, and so we're engaged on looking at reforms to no-knock warrants and decertification of police officers that do bad acts, that they shouldn't be licensed to travel down to the next city or hop from city to county or otherwise. So we're running the bill. In fact, Senator Danny Carroll, if he talked to you, has sponsored that bill. He's our primary sponsor on that legislation, and it looks like that hopefully moved off the Senate floor today on over to the Kentucky House. But in these last few minutes, Sandra, I'll be quiet and let you ask questions.
I was going to say, we've got about 10 minutes left here, and we do have a couple of questions.
Just real quick, JD, and kind of off topic or off subject, we've talked about infrastructure a lot today, most every conversation we've had. Can you, we have probably over 100 people on the call right now. They may not be aware of what League of Cities is or does, or how you keep referencing the chamber. You're not part of the chamber, but you have similar views to the chamber. But maybe the 30-second Cliff Note version. Who is League of Cities, and who are you, and what do you do?
I'm sorry, Brent. That was a little presumptuous on my part. I thought everybody knew who the League of Cities was.
We should have probably said that.
As they probably should. But for those of us that aren't familiar and don't live in your world, who are you and what do you do? Why are you on my screen?
Was formed, the 30-second version. League of Cities was formed in 1927 to bring all the 416 cities together to be able to advocate with a unified voice in Frankfort, because in the past, legislature would pick and choose. You can see that left over on this restaurant tax example, to advocate with a unified voice for city governments, because we do rely on the state. Over the years, our organization has grown to be what you would traditionally think of as a particular trade association just for city governments. So we provide education, training, legal services, communication services, IT services for city governments throughout Kentucky. And again, 416 cities in Kentucky that pretty much all of them are members. The ones that aren't are pretty small in Jefferson County. We also provide insurance and finance services, and that's what drives most of the financial well-being of our organization. We insure, from a liability standpoint, about 85% of Kentucky cities, including Paducah. We were there, as you heard last year, involved with the cybersecurity breach.
Sure.
It was our insurance company that helped resolve that issue for the city of Paducah. So we're the way I phrase it, a one-stop shop for city governments. There's not always a lot of expertise on staff. We lend legal expertise for those cities that don't have full-time city attorneys, and we support them. But the mission of our organization, let me boil it down really simply, is to serve those that have decided that they want to dedicate themselves to public service, to help them in their mission to make their community the best that it can be. And that's what we do.
Very good. Thank you so much for that. Just a quick question. One of the Chamber's legislative positions concerns regulatory assistance for addressing blighted or deteriorated or vacant properties. What tools do you find that are available for us to address these properties?
And I'm glad you brought that up. And Sandra, I'm sorry I forgot to do that.
No, I was getting ready to. That was just, I had already told Dr. Reese, like, I'm going to ask this question before you, because it's very important in our community, and it may be in other cities too. But I wanted you to address that, including the part about creating a conservatorship for rehabilitation of qualifying areas. And I'm looking at your book where it says, give cities a new way to seek a solution that ensures the financial and aesthetic value of the community. So could you address that for cities like Paducah and others?
So right now there are some decent tools in place, but most of them involve using code enforcement process. So you've cited the property for violations under Kentucky law, cited them for violations. You place liens on the property. Most of them are delinquent tax liens. Most of those liens end up in a lot of properties end up being way more than the value of the property. So there's no incentive for any foreclosure action. And if you do a foreclosure action, in most instances, it doesn't end up that the property ends up being returned to productive use at all. But those are good tools, being able to do foreclosure action on some properties, being able to use the code enforcement process under the law. But we've started looking at other states, and Senator Robbie Mills has introduced Senate Bill 105. That's currently pending before the Senate Judiciary Committee over in the Kentucky Senate. This is the second year he's introduced that bill. That would allow the city to file an action to get a conservator appointed for the property that would allow it to be rehabilitated under the court order, and then sold once the improvements are made. And so it involves the court system, because you're looking at property rights. A lot of cities would say, well, why can't we just go in and condemn the property? We've got a little constitutional problem there, nor would you want government to be able to, or most people wouldn't want government to just be able to come in and condemn and take over the property. It involves the court system, because you are affecting the due process, both procedurally and substantively, rights of those property owners. Get a conservator appointed. That's someone by the court who's nominated generally by a city government, who would develop, improve the property, bring it back in to code, waive those code fees or code fines that they have for violations as a result of getting it improved, and then sell it and get a small fee for being able to do that. So it engages private enterprise. The city itself wouldn't be the conservator. They would go in and partner with a local business or something like that in order to be able to do it.
Do you think that would be the best tool to help a city address an issue that has just a standing property that's very much deteriorated? And An eyesore?
It could be. You know, it's another tool, Sandra, in the toolbox beyond just going in and finding it for code enforcement violations where you know you're not getting any kind of movement, where you're filing liens and forcing a foreclosure action, which is an expense to the taxpayer as well. This could be an additional tool instead of using what I would call more draconian measures, which is what you have right now, which is essentially condemn it, take it over, demolish it. If it's in a situation that it threatens the safety and health of the community, that of course spends taxpayer money to do that. Or you continue this never-ending cycle of fining and foreclosure. And so it's a little less draconian. You got a lot of constitutional limitations with those tools. Some cities have started on their own right now, creating incentive programs in order to be able to do that, or providing, if it's historic property, you all have a historic I don't know if Paducah does, historic preservation tax credits that can be given, other types of local programs to encourage that. But it's worked well in North Carolina and Pennsylvania as being a good alternative tool, but it really depends on the circumstance. You know, you're not going to get any panacea here with one size fits all. It depends on where the property's at, what situation it's in terms of the mortgage, the primary mortgage interest on it. Depends on where it's at in terms of its dilapidated status in order to be able to do it. So city officials have asked for this additional tool, which may be a little less draconian to try to put it back to productive use.
Thank you. Dr. Reese.
Okay, Mr. Chaney, welcome to Paducah virtually. Happy to be chair of the Paducah Chamber. Infrastructure question, two parts. The stance of the Kentucky League of Cities as it pertains to Wi-Fi access and broadband is important for us educationally as well, but particularly the impact on small businesses and transportation overall, of course, is core to the success of our small businesses as well. What's the Kentucky League of Cities stance on those two issues?
Obviously, on the transportation, we've got to invest, and that's going to take state action on the transportation infrastructure element. Also, looking at hybrid and electric vehicles, in addition to that gas tax, they're going to have to do that. These state projects are just as important. I think if you ask a lot of your local officials, yeah, we want money to come back for city and county roads, but the state projects as well are vitally important. Most of them have a really direct impact, so the state having adequate access. We've got, billions and billions. I forgot what the latest figure was. Last year, I believe it was 90 billion is what we were using when cities, counties, and the state looked at deferred infrastructure improvements. That's what we've got out there, and that's huge for Kentucky. That is about 8 times the state's budget every year. It's budget. So we've got to raise the tax in order to do that. With regard to infrastructure on broadband, we have a lot of deficiencies. A lot of people will talk about that being an urban rural, this fake. I'm going to call it fake in Kentucky. Besides Lexington and Louisville, there's really not an urban rural divide in this state. We're a rural state. Our communities, if you go to the National League of Cities, we're all small. Besides Lexington and Louisville, none of even Bowling Green and Owensboro don't have to sit on the small cities committee at the National League of Cities. We don't have this true urban rural divide in the way a lot of people do it throughout the rest of the country. We have a major issue. We have cities in Kentucky where you have 7% broadband coverage. Most people think, well, you're in a city, you got to be able, surely you have coverage. And that's been a product, I think, of one, not having the funds to be able to make that investment, but two, your private providers have made selections inside of city limits. I'm not going to say urban, but inside of city limits in many instances regarding where they're going to offer the service based on their return. It has not been looked at as a basic utility infrastructure similar to water. And I think that's been a failure. This pandemic, I believe, highlights the fact that we've got to look at that as essential, just like we do water services, electrical utility services, and the government has a role to play there. The private providers aren't going to do that on their own. I mean, they've had years to be able to do that. So one piece of legislation that's been introduced, and Secretary Ryan Quarles, I don't know whether he was one of your speakers or not, Sandra, he's proposed a bill to create the Office of Innovation in the Department of Agriculture to help solicit funds for that. Representative Pratt's introduced a bill to create that office, and for some appropriations from the General Assembly and utilization and leverage of CARES funding in order to be able to do that. We had a handful of cities, Dr. Reese, in Kentucky that took their CARES money, reimbursement that they were able to get, and they have made an investment. Covington did this extensively. They took those funds and looked at their underserved areas or non-served areas and made connections, set up Wi-Fi, broadband access in places within their city that they identified as deserts. We've had county governments that are looking at my county. My wife's a deputy judge here in Madison County, sitting in the other room. She's taken her CARES money, and the county has, and they're looking at investing in something called wet fiber, using existing water utility lines in order to be able to spread that out in parts of our county that doesn't have coverage. But we got to address it from an economic vitality standpoint, from a competitive standpoint. The legislature has to make the investment in it, but so do our communities have to do that. So that's our stance. It has to be greatly improved.
Thank you.
JD, thank you so much for joining us today. You were one of our speakers last year, and we really appreciated your time then. I know you're just a phone call away, and we really appreciate the relationship that our community has with the Kentucky League of Cities. So thank you for keeping us informed and keeping us straight.
Thanks for including me. Good to see you, and congratulations again on your award. Well deserved.
Thank you. Well, next I feel like we should almost have a fireside chat with our next speaker who we're going to bring in, and we will have Dr. Reese and Brent and I on with John Cooper. John founded Capital Link in 1987 after serving as Chief of Staff for the Kentucky Senate. He's the Chief Legislative and Administrative Agency Strategist for Capital Link, as well as the Managing Partner. John's close working relationship with members of the General Assembly is due to his decades of work on political and public issues campaigns at the state, local, and federal level. In the late 1990s, or as I would say, just to give a little history, back in the mid-1990s, somewhere around in there, when the late Dr. Wallet Montgomery, I believe it was 1995, he was chair of the Paducah Chamber Board of Directors. And the chamber was working on two critical issues for our community, pretty much all at the same time. And that, I guess I would say, it was back in the old days when we would go to Frankfort and ask for funding for projects that were critical to our area. And we were working on the University of Kentucky College of Engineering, getting that established here. Our community had identified the need to have engineers here, and we thought it would be a real economic development tool and a growth for our community. As well as there was another group working on the establishment of a performing arts center in our community, which is now the Carson Center. As we know, we were successful with both. We prioritized those. We went to Frankfort. John helped lead our efforts in that. And so I want to bring him on the screen with us now. I really feel like, John, that we want to kind of have a fireside chat with you. So if you would put Brent and me and Dr. Reese all on the screen so we could have what would be kind of a fireside chat about things that have happened in Paducah through the last 25 years and what you're seeing now. I know you have joined us part of this time today to hear. We've talked about infrastructure probably more than most people even wanted to hear. We've talked about Senate Bill 5 with COVID legal liability reform protection. We've talked about unemployment. We've talked about broadband.
We've spent a lot of time talking about all of our priorities, I think. And before you even start, I would just like to extend an invitation to those. We obviously have more as part of our Frankfort group today, part of our trip, if you will, that have joined us today than we have on our business advocacy committee. So Dr. Reese, if you'll allow me to share a shameless plug for our committee. Again, we meet the first Friday of every month at lunchtime. We meet for an hour. We do a little bit of work in between, certainly by email or by technology. But if you've enjoyed some of the conversations, some of the behind the scenes stuff of what goes into something becoming law, or how does this come about, or how does the Carson Center in Paducah happen? How does Murray State Paducah campus come about? How do we receive funding for Western WKCTC? How do these things happen? If you're interested in that, reach out to us. Reach out to the chamber, to Carrie, to Sandra, to myself, to Dr. Reese. We're looking for people that want to be involved in the other side of coming up with these priorities. Hey, if you have, we joke about off air, if you've complained about something before and you want to get involved in it, hey, who says that's our priority? What about this? Have you ever thought about or talked about this? That ought to be a priority. If you want to be involved in that, man, here's your chance. This is your opportunity. Certainly next year, Sandra, I'm going to claim it right now. We will be in Frankfort. We'll be on the ground. We'll be there in person. If you haven't been in your state capital, if you hadn't been in your capital annex, met the leaders and people that we talked to today, if you hadn't met them in person or seen in person, sign up. Make sure you're there. It's intriguing. I use the term, I geek out on some of this stuff sometimes, but we'd love to have you a part of that. So, yeah. John, you've been with us for around politics probably maybe not as long as I've been alive, but close to it.
25 years. John, I'm going to date you a little bit, but I was right there with you. It was about 25 years ago when we hired John Cooper, the Paducah Chamber, along with the community, to be our chief lobbyist and to be our voice in Frankfort and in D.C. So, John, I guess we might want to let you talk.
Well, and I would love to, John, if I can steer you just a little bit. We've talked to all of our legislators, our personal legislators. We talked to House leadership this morning. We've talked to Senate leadership this morning. And so we've seen from the legislators, and they kind of have to speak a certain way sometimes. Maybe you could show us behind the scenes or what you see. You're outsider looking in. You're outside, but you're a block away from the Capitol. You probably have the closest seat of anyone that's not elected as of today. So.
Can y'all hear me?
We
Yes,
can.
Sir. We use the old adage, they'll listen to you more if you're from out of town. And sometimes it's a little easier to get attention. I will say this before I get started with that. 25 years, I've been doing this work for 37 years. 25 years I've done work with Paducah. It's been a labor of love the whole way. It's a second community for me, kind of a second home for me in a lot of ways. I go back to the 2+2 engineering and the Carson Center and the Avalos project and centrifuges and uranium enrichment plant and cleanup and the Graves Industrial Park and projects at Barclay and on and on and on. And trust me, with Sandra running the chamber, there's still plenty to do. She's got a long list and she checks it twice. So she keeps me on the ball. But honestly, you're unique in that you're a little bit removed from Frankfort. You're a little bit removed from the Lexington and Louisville media markets, which have a different take on Frankfort than actually you do in some instances. But being a little bit removed sometimes is an advantage. I will say this, that for the community has used every resource that it has had to make itself as effective as it could be over these 25 years that I've worked with you. And I think what you've got for the fruits of your labor shows that. When you think about the legislators from that part of the state, Brett, it's a commitment. If you want to be a legislator from the far western part of Kentucky, it's a commitment. I mean, it's a 4-hour drive to go work. And, there's probably a lot of Friday afternoons when they head home, they go, "Is this really worth it?"
Amen.
You know, because I mean, you know, you judge your results sometimes in inches, and sometimes you're not sure whether you're moving forward or backwards. And it takes patience, and you all have had lots of patience over the years, patience with me, patience with the local legislators, and everybody's had a different personality. I was saddened by the passing of former Mayor Albert Jones. I got notice of that yesterday. I actually got it from the chamber, and I will tell you one, but before I get into details of kind of where we are now, one really funny story about Albert, and I've worked with a lot of legislators over the years, all with different personalities, but Albert had a dry, witty kind of sense of humor. And he came up to me once when he was getting ready to leave to come home. He came home to be mayor from the legislature. And he said, "I just want you to know that there's about a half a dozen bills up here that I have been involved in or sponsored that were just horrible." And he said, the common denominator is you were the one that got me to do all of them. And so that was typical of Albert. I can envision in my mind he and Lewis Johnson from Owensboro, who were running buddies, and how they would cohort together. But was a fine man. I'm sorry to hear of his passing. Dr. Montgomery's gone now, who was there when I started it. You know, we had Fred Paxton, Dr. Montgomery, both gone now. Dave Benton's still around, and there's some others, and we've had a good run. I will say this: it's a little harder to be a legislator now, in my opinion. If I look at these legislators, the turnover we've had in this General Assembly, we've just about in the last 3 sessions, or the last 6 years, turned over about the whole General Assembly, or just about, particularly in the House. We've had a lot of turnover. And one of the problems that COVID has contributed to what's going on is, first off, the last group that came in the last elections, not the ones that were elected this past November, they were still trying to get to know each other. And COVID interrupted that. And the new group that's come in, they don't know each other yet. And Brent can tell you that it when you don't have that personal relationship and knowing somebody, it affects your trust on the floor when they ask you to do something.
Sure.
And because that trust is earned. It's earned if you're a legislator, if you're a lobbyist, or if you're advocating for local community or whatever, or corporately, that trust is really earned. And so there, I talked to. I was on the phone with Senator Julie Rocky Adams, who's a member of Senate leadership, the other day, and we were in the middle of a pretty serious discussion. I stopped her and I said, "I have a question to ask you." And she said, "What?" I said, "Do you miss us?" She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, we're not up there roaming the halls. Do you miss us?" And she laughed and she said, "You know, I do." She said, "We come out of our offices up here, it's like a ghost town." And she said, "The best way I could describe it to you, it's just odd. It's just weird and it's odd." And so the work that they're doing, and one of the reasons they did a continuation budget at the end of the last session, they had no idea how much money they were going to have coming into this second year of the biennium, the budget they're doing today. They weren't sure how bad the economy was going to get. They weren't sure how much federal help they were going to get. It turned out that Kentucky had passed the internet marketplace sales tax a few years ago. I was involved in that, and actually being able to tax those things we buy on the internet has been a savior and a godsend to Kentucky's revenue. If you look at the purchases of stuff from Amazon and Walmart and Etsy, and you go to, I mean, there's tons of things, Target and everybody else. I mean, my neighborhood, sometimes the delivery trucks are in each other's way, trying to get into the neighborhood. But we're gaining revenue from all that, and that's really helped to support what could have been a pretty bleak situation. Now, on the transportation funding front, we've kicked this can down the road for a long time, actually too long. I've been involved in the only 2 gas tax adjustments in the last 35 years, and they're hard to do. But I can tell you, there were a core of folks that really supported that. And, that is still evolving. Thank goodness for Sal Santoro. He's got the patience of Job. Most people would have thrown up their hands with this. And he has the most trouble with people inside of his own party, as you well know. on getting people to support an increase in funding. We are going to get all of the manufacturers, Toyota, General Motors, and Ford, submitted a document this week because I delivered it to the Senate leadership that gave them a number on electric vehicle fees. So that would be the fee in replacement of the fuel tax. And I don't know if anybody's talked about the actual fee. I know they've talked about the fuel tax, but the average miles per gallon of all the fleets that are sold in this country is 24.9 miles per gallon. And so the average fuel cost, if you bought motor fuels, would be about $120 at that average fuel rate at 24.9 miles per gallon. So we submitted that to the legislature as the fee to charge the EV vehicles, which are getting ready to flood the market and are getting ready to be very prevalent. So that'd be $120 fee per year in lieu of the gas or the motor fuels tax. In addition to that, you're going to see hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, which Toyota is pioneering. They're going to have something very similar to that because they're not going to use gasoline. I believe that the Biden administration is going to have a major infrastructure bill before it's done. And I believe that the state needs to be ready to grab that. And I believe we're going to be asked to put up our part. And if we don't pass the motor fuels tax, we could be really short in our ability to help ourselves. And so I think that's something that we're starting to see. Everybody keeps putting it off, like we put off pensions for a long time. We still have some pension issues. And I don't know, I know we talked about, somebody today, I believe, talked a little bit about the pension, the teacher retirement pension piece. Did they mention that today?
Representative Rudy mentioned it and talked about it.
Well, it's something that's going to move on out, and it's an adjustment to help them maintain the teachers' retirement system. But when you look at it, your health departments, the quasi-governmental agencies, have got to have some help this session. They got some last session, or several of them would have closed because of their pension obligations. And look how important health departments have been during this pandemic. And we've seen a resurgence of understanding of the significance of public health. And so that's something this General Assembly is going to have to deal with, and they know that in the budget that they're going to kick out the door. The unemployment insurance has been talked about. There are a lot of things that we're going to be doing as we restart the economy post-pandemic. And I will tell you, we're getting ready. One of the things we're getting ready to go into phase 1C of the vaccinations. You guys, Paducah, I think both the hospitals weren't they sites of some of the vaccines early on?
Correct.
Yes, they are, but we're not to 1C yet.
Right. No, you're not. Nobody is, and won't be till the end of the month. Well, I was talking with Jim Gray, the Transportation Secretary, this past Sunday afternoon, and we were talking about the timing of getting that out. Right. This past week, we vaccinated about 50,000 people in Kentucky total. And so Jim said, we were talking about how we were going to do 1C. And he said, well, you know how many people are in 1C? That's the 60-year-olds and the essential employees of manufacturers and food processors and all of those types of things. There's 1.2 million people in 1C. Now, if we do 200,000 a week, that's 6 weeks to vaccinate 1C. And that all is dependent on the amount of vaccine supply that we have. And the Biden administration is starting to accelerate that. And plus there are some other factors that are going to cause some acceleration. And if the Johnson & Johnson comes fully online, that will help. But I think we're still looking at middle of the year. I think we're looking at probably June before we see everyone vaccinated, and I hope we have it then. And I think we could see some acceleration in the amount of supply. But this is important to restarting the economy. And someone asked me the other day, how long are we going to be wearing masks? And I said, a while, in my opinion. I said, I think a good bit of this year. And the biggest thing that you've seen, and you've heard about this today, I think Senator Thayer expressed it. There's frustration between the General Assembly and the governor. And there is not in just this state. There is in every state over the pandemic. and over how it was handled. And there's always some second guessing. I can tell you this, I wouldn't want to be the governor of any state right now.
Agree.
You talk about the toughest job around is to be a governor of a state and try to have to answer for all of the things that you have to answer for and be responsible to it. But one of the things that we have to always remember about the General Assembly, when I get aggravated at them about fussing with the governor, and Brett, you know, General Assemblies want to be relevant too. I mean, that's what they're there for. But one of the things we have to always remember about the General Assembly is they can't get away from it. When they go to church, people talk to them about the inadequacies of state government. When they go to ball games, people talk to them about the inadequacies of state government. So we have to be sympathetic to the fact they never get away from it. Mm-hmm. And when you sign on to that, you're there all the time. The governor's a little insulated from it, but it's going to be, it's a time when people are going to need to work together. There's going to be a lot of challenges. This liability bill really needs to pass. And I'm really nervous about what it's going to look like, the Senate Bill 5, when it comes out the door of the House. And I hope that we have something that will still be worth doing. In addition to that, you know, we've got, for your small businesses, there's a bill that came out of House committee, and it's supposed to come off the floor today that would allow for deductibility of expenses paid by the PPP loans. And that's something the federal government has already allowed. The IRS allows businesses to deduct expenses that they paid with those PPP loans, some of which would be forgiven. The state revenue department has not conformed to that yet. That's a big deal for small businesses. And the CPAs and bankers and others have been pushing them to go ahead and do that. I think it looks like that the General Assembly is going to push that really through quickly. They need to get it through by the end of by the end of this month, because the corporate income taxes are due earlier. And I think the governor has indicated he will sign that when it comes across his desk. So that's a piece that you may or may not have heard of today. And then, Sandra, I'll be glad to answer any questions or talk more about, in general, what I think is going on. It is a difficult time for these guys to work, though, given the environment that they're in, and given we had a couple of lobbyists this week that came up to the General Assembly. They were supposed to see one person and leave. Well, they wandered around for half the afternoon all over the annex and ended up eating lunch in the cafeteria, which nobody's supposed to do. And then they had to pull everybody together and see who was going to have to be quarantined at the end of the day on Thursday. And it ended up being because one of them had COVID. And so those are the kinds of things that you don't think about. But I know Dr. Reese, you running a college, you deal with that every day, that kind of stuff where you're bringing a lot of people together. But those are some of the things they're dealing with up here, that literally the Capitol is closed. The annex is closed. When I go in to testify before a committee, they'll take my temperature. They'll walk me basically to the room that I'm supposed to go to, and then they'll ask me to make sure that I come back out and sign out when I leave. And so that's it's tough. We're trying to kill the bills that we really don't like in the original committee, so we don't have to scramble to work them, because it's difficult to do that. So
let me just see if Dr. Reese has a question. Dr. Reese.
Yeah. Yes. So, John, this is my first year as chair. And, when you get in the chair role, I guess, you brought in the tent. And the core of it, though, is the advocacy and certainly the associated membership of small businesses, right? And Brent said it very, very beautifully that, by way of the Zoom, we actually probably, I think Sandra said, quadrupled the normal amount of people who will go to Frankfort. So to me, the power is that for those who are not as familiar or thinking about membership, they've had an opportunity through this day to see what we do live, right? It removes that guesswork. So I think it's a very powerful thing. But then this is where you come in, though, as you mentioned, as lobbyists, right? You're also competing against other lobbyists, lobbying for their respective areas. And certainly we've been able to punch above our weight. So with that being said, so as I reflect on the conversation today, it does seem, though, that there is some agreement that certainly support for small businesses, particularly the uninsurance, that type thing, is one important part of it. So one part of my question continues to be There are some small businesses that probably won't be able to reopen. And certainly some of our smaller and more diverse may be disproportionately impacted. I don't know if you see anything in the tea leaves in terms of, support that could help lift all ships. Is probably my first question.
That's a great question. And I do believe one of the sad things is there are some businesses that probably won't reopen or that won't make it through, and that they are quite diverse businesses. A lot of that's going to depend on what this last CARES Act that's getting ready to come out of DC, which is going to be probably the biggest in terms of dollars. And a lot of that money is going to go towards help for local state governments, locally, schools locally, and also there's a stimulus money for individuals. But I think one of the emphasis is going to be on trying to steer money towards these small businesses to try to keep them going or try to help them diversify. This is one of those times when you're either light on your feet and you're able to maneuver, you're able to bounce with the punches, or you're gonna get crushed, and that's not always fair. I will say this: I think that the governor put in quite a bit of money for small business, and I hope that the General Assembly, they may reallocate it, but I hope the General Assembly will leave some of that money in there to make sure that they can use it. The big bulk of that's going to come from the federal government if we get it. One of the things that obviously we've talked about today is that the pandemic showed our weaknesses in broadband all over Kentucky. And we have put right out $1 billion in broadband already. And we've got a lot of work left to do. And I think that the General Assembly is paying much closer attention to the oversight of that today than they did before. I think we're going to have most of our public school teachers vaccinated very soon. We're going to start to see schools open back up. I think that'll help, Dr. Reese. I think that's going to help open the economy up to get schools open back up. I know when you're functioning at the college at 100% horsepower or 100%, if you're the economy around you is obviously doing much better when you guys are doing much better. So I hope that helped to answer your question.
Yeah, thanks, John.
John, is there any kind of secret you could share with us that we haven't heard today? I mean, even I would say even the number, 1.2 million in the 1C category.
1C category, there's 1 point, because I was asking, I talked to Secretary Gray Sunday afternoon, but right before the Super Bowl, he's not rested any. I mean, he's working every day, literally every day. And we talked about, can we pull some larger groups together to vaccinate them as groups, such as big manufacturers. We were talking about the Toyotas and the UPSs and the Amazons of the world, but also about, Dr. Reese, I don't know where you are at the community college level vaccinating your people, but groups like that. And that's when he told me, he said, well, okay, but, and Dr. Stack uses a term called curate. And curate is pulling together, but it's pulling together groups of people to vaccinate. And I think Dr. Stack's fear is, where do you start? Because with 1.2 million, I told Secretary Gray, I said 1.2 million people, if we're not on our game and organized, will be a free-for-all. And I said, that's what I'm worried about. And he said, I am too. And he said, that's why he said, they're getting a pretty good bounce in vaccines this week and next week. But I said, so what's your goal running forward to vaccinate per week? And he said 200,000. If we could get 200,000 vaccinated per week, it still take us 6 weeks to get through, 1C. But there's others, I think the vaccine is going to get more plentiful as we move along based on everything we've heard. But it's a Herculean effort, I will tell you. And then, we know that in nursing home business, 90% plus of the patients are taking the vaccine, but only less than 60% of the staff are taking the vaccine. So they've had to go back and re-educate them. They're seeing now that as the first staff took that in the nursing home, that the staff are now starting to come along. But here's the secret. Here's what people haven't said today. There's a lot of work yet to be done on this pandemic, a lot. And, you're going to see it locally in the work that you're doing. In fact, you're already doing it. You're making adjustments. I thought your program today was excellent. And I've seen a bunch of these. Ad nauseum, I've seen a bunch of these, trust me. Your program was excellent today, and I don't think anything drug out too long. I think that's the way you split this up was really good, and they also got some breaks. But I mean, I got some good information myself today, and I'm here all the time. And I think the big thing is remember the state, for what we've been through, the state budget could be in a lot worse shape. And I think that's a big, big, big plus. We're not where we were in 2008. Now, keep in mind that the federal government now has more debt than the total economic output of the country. And that's going to have to be reckoned with, but there's been a big infusion of money. We'll see how the economy goes long term. I really think it's going to be important for us to really be smart about getting aggressive and moving the economy forward. People are ready to do stuff. People are dying to do stuff. They want to do things. You know, you benefit a lot in Paducah from tourism and travel, and I'm hopeful that as we start up that will start to get better.
Sandra, just real quick, I think we would be remiss, and again, we pointed out before, our crowd is 4 times larger today than it is on our normal advocacy committee meetings, and I mentioned that last Friday or last time we met, that John is the reason there are 2 particular pieces of legislation this year going on right now that if John weren't there, that Paducah, McCracken County, our community would not be a part of. And so, John, I want to thank you again publicly for our larger crowd for your work on our behalf, and for even though you're not one of ours, we claim you as one of ours. And so I appreciate you being our seat at the table. Honestly, some of those conversations come up. We didn't even know they were going to happen. And you're sitting there and saying, hey, well, Paducah has a commercial airport. Paducah has rail. Paducah has a riverfront. Paducah has an arts district. Paducah has this. Paducah has that. And so you work Paducah into the conversation. So on behalf of our chamber and our community, thank you.
I appreciate that. That whole airport bill that we're going to have probably by next session is going to have Paducah in it. Paducah is one of the 5 commercial airports, and you are going to have a seat at the table. We made sure of that. That will be a good thing, because there's not been a whole lot of direction outside of, this community, Paducah, has benefited from the aviation fund on this big project because it worked its butt off to do that. But there needs to be monies coming every year to the commercial airports to keep them going.
Agreed. Thank you.
And that's what we're going to try to do. Any other questions?
John, I feel like we should have a plaque for you that says congratulations on your 25 years, or thank you for your 25 years of service. We appreciate it. I know you started at a really young age, but thank you for being
really
a part of it.
Really young age. Now,
Yes.
I tell you what I'll do. I'll come down. You can take me back. We'll go to dinner, because I like to do that when we come to Paducah. So.
All right. That sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank everyone that's joined us today via Zoom. We have talked about that. We would be more than happy to take 2 busloads to Frankfort next year. And we should. We want to have a diverse representation on a business advocacy committee. And we strive to have that on our executive committee and on our board. I want to show you who the executive committee members are of the Paducah Chamber board. We're very fortunate to have great leadership from throughout our community that represents small business, large business, our DOE contractors, our financial industries, the whole realm in the medical community as well. So we're really proud of our board of directors. This is our executive committee, and then we have our full board, a slide with it too. We are happy and very appreciative of this. I thought we're going to show that board slide too. Up there, there you go. That shows all of the members of our board. As I said, we represent law firms, CPA firms, the DOE contractors, our hospitals, small and large business, and we want to represent you. So as I said, we're made up of young professionals, this education, a lot as a chamber, Paducah Chamber. We've had almost 1,000 members at one time. We're a little bit less than that now, but we will be growing and working hard to represent our community. I want a couple of things from today. I want to remind you, it's the broadband test, and that is on our Facebook page, and we'll move it up and make sure it is. I want to just show you the slide one more time of who our legislators are and how to contact them. You've heard a lot about the importance today of contacting your local legislators, keeping in touch with them, respectfully, of course, about how you feel about particular issues, and I hope you've learned about those issues today. So there's our local legislators. And I'm just going to conclude with thanking our sponsors. We could not do these kind of programs if we didn't have our sponsors. So our presenting sponsor was Bacon Farmer Workman Engineering and Testing and Markup Engineering. And our additional sponsors were CSI, Denton Law Firm, HDR Engineering, Jim Smith Contracting, Swift & Staley, and U.S. Bank. And I also want to thank our board chair, Dr. Anton Reese, for being with us today, and then my cohort up here, Brent Hausman with Baird Financial Group. I know you took a day off of work to be here with us and to help with asking these questions and keeping us on task. So we really appreciate that as the vice chair of the chamber and vice chair of business advocacy. Thank you.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate it. Today, to all of our listeners, thank you so much for being here. And we will be back on March 4th with our March Power and Partnership Breakfast. It's sponsored by Lundberg Medical Imaging. The speaker that day is Matt Tackett. He's with the Kentucky Association for Economic Development. And he actually is going to be sharing some information that is a new tool for small businesses. So we hope you'll join us then. You can get all of this information today about our priorities at paducahchamber.org, or look at our Facebook page for some of the other things that we've mentioned today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the support that you give to the Paducah Chamber. We are here to be your voice. Thank you.